Hi guys, this is video overview number 6 of the Test Electronics Fixed Arduino Mini open source code. Now in the past videos we went over the remote, the serial, and the last inner workings of this. Now I want to review uh, the rest of these tabs. So let's start with the easy stuff here. Internal is just a bunch of, first we start out with an array of stuff that's used in the programs down here. Uh, they're spaced. This is used in one program. They're grouped together in groups to kind of make things a little easier to understand. Now, some of the simple stuff is the power on routine, the power off routine. Uh, Test result is kind of an important one. It calls this at the end of the tests and displays the results, either pass or fail. Then you got a pass tone, a fail tone, how those tones are generated, and you got your voice control that we went over a little bit already. The most important one is the very last one, test cycle. This is what controls what test follows the other test. Basically, in your test, you call the test, and it goes through the test map, which calls the sequence of tests. Test cycle increments that so that it goes to the next test after it. And another thing test cycle does is it allows you in here to retest certain tests that may have failed and change some parameter and test it again using a slightly different parameter and see if it passes that time. Tests that you don't want the test technician to see that may have failed, that you can maybe extend to be a bit longer due to certain conditions, that maybe the board wasn't put in the fixture exactly even, or some mechanical thing like a solenoid has to press something and maybe press a little bit longer because the rubber around the switch is cold or something like that. You'd want to put in here and change it to delay a little longer. Well, press the solenoid a little longer so it presses harder. So that's what this test cycle is about. So that basically is the internal here, a bunch of basic tests, and you might see them called out back here, and just so you know where to find them, you can look them up here under internal. Password is just one simple use. One time it's used when you want to save settings. So if you're going to preferences, this password is used down here in Save Preferences. So when you select Save Preferences, it's going to ask you for a password before it actually saves the preferences. That way you don't accidentally save preferences to EEPROM that you don't intend to save. And if you do happen to do that, you can always recover from that. There's a factory default down in here, right here, that you should set up to be however you want your defaults. We set it like this. You might want something different, but these are good settings right here. And for some reason, if somebody saves something to EEPROM they shouldn't have, you can always restore factory defaults and get out of it, so you don't cause there's not a bunch of confusion and downtime is caused. Okay, so this brings me to preferences. Let's go over this. If you scroll up the tests, you get tests. If you scroll down into the negative numbers, you get preferences. And preferences are all the internal workings on the fixture. The negative one just turns power on and off. There's this negative 2 controls the LED intensity, and then you got another one that controls the voice, allows you to turn voice control on and off. Another one allows you to set different settings on the Bluetooth. And let me go down here and just show you basically how all these work. This is just, of course, the array of prompts that are going to be put to the LCD display. So the functions are down here. They're actually called out here. Now this is a case statement, and it's kind of arranged a little bit oddly. And the reason for that is because we used to, when we imported this from the Mega, we used to have the text all in here instead of up in the array. Now we're just calling numbers out to recall the text that's in the array, but we still kept it in this order so that you can see where it's calling it from in the array. We think this makes it a little bit easier to read rather than writing the cases conventionally with the functions under it. We put them over here. It makes it easier to understand exactly what it is doing. Let's go to the Bluetooth, since that's a fairly big one. We'll use that as an example. Bluetooth, you have three options, or four options, case 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are going to call for the title on line 0, it's going to put 12. And then on line 1, it's going to put one of these values depending on what case you're at. So let's just look at line 12 and through 16. Now, this is the title, the negative test. And this always say -0 here. This is going to be replaced in the buffer by the location of where these are in the array. So you can move them around without having to worry about changing this number, and it'll still be okay. And add more stuff to it. It'll still be okay if you want to add more to the preferences, but we kind of advise against that unless you really need something in preferences. Leave this to us to modify. You should actually probably not really modify this much yourself, because we might make updates to it and additional features, and you might just want to copy this file in. It's just good for you to understand how it works, but you're not going to really need to change this kind of thing. But this would allow you to turn the Bluetooth off, set it to remote, set it to print, set it to tolerance. I went over that in previous videos. And probably the easiest one would be the LED intensity, understanding how that works. Here it would print the title, here it prints the LED intensity. It leaves this blank for now. That's going to be filled in by the LED intensity switch. So what it does is it cycles through this. It's a byte of information, so it can't go higher than 250. It just adds 25 each time and then writes that out to the power LED, which would be defined here. Power LED right here, which is digital pin 5, which is a pulse width modulated pin. And if you output a value from 0 to 1024, you get a variable intensity. So we're just using 0 to 250. That's enough for the LED. We don't want it brighter than 250. It gets really bright. So that basically describes preferences. And now, an important part of this preferences is the factory defaults and save to EEPROM, but you really need to remember factory defaults. This is something you might want to modify, and also remember it because these things, for example, full test. Let's look up full test where the variable is defined. Full test is here, and it's a Boolean. It can be 1 or 0, and it's got this exclamation point, which is a not. So this means it's in the comment section. So this means it's my way of telling you that this is not going to work. Basically, if you put a 0 here and think that you just turned full test off, so you set it to AQL by putting 0 here, you did not. Because you did until it runs the first thing, which is the setup, and then it reads it restores preferences from EEPROM. So basically it saves it and then restores the preferences from EEPROM and overwrites whatever you put here. So what you have to do to get around this is you go to this one with the question mark. You change this to 1, and that instructs the processor to save the default preferences to EEPROMs. These are the default. So then you change these to whatever you want. With this set to 1, you program it. Then you set it to 0, and you program it again. Now this puts everything into EEPROM. Now you still have to save the factory preferences, change the factory preferences, but at least now it's saved in EEPROM and it will work right. So that's how you update everything with the exclamation point or the not in front of it. You have to set the question mark to 1, program it, change it back to 0, and then program it again. So program it twice. And then you have to also set factory defaults to whatever value you have here. So basically anything with the exclamation point you have to change here. You have to change in preferences under factory defaults here, and you have to program it twice by changing this to a 1 and then a 0. So those 4 steps, remember that for those exclamation points. That's why I marked it like that, because that can be very confusing for people to have to remember. The rest of this is self-explanatory. Here's where you set your variables. These are your programs, password, preferences. This goes over the entire fixture. The Fixture Arduino Mini open source code. It's free for you to use as you see fit. Hope you find it useful. Build off of it as much as you like. It's open source, completely free. There's no hidden compiled code or anything like that. So hope you enjoyed it, and if you like this video and want to see more videos like this, there are more available on testelectronics.com.